All right. Well, welcome everyone. It's great to see a packed room for a really, really important and timely event. I'm going to quickly run through introductions of our panelists. We have 4 in the room and 2 on the screen. Then we will see a brief video from the High Commissioner of UNHCR, Barham Saleh, talking about the new 50 by 35 strategy or agenda, and then we will get into some discussion with our very eminent panel. So first, and I don't think we can see them on the screen in the room, but I am assured they are here. We are joined online by Ambassador Rafael Quintero Cubides from Colombia, and also by Mr. Brent Malahay from Equity Bank. He is the Chief Strategy Officer of Equity Bank Group in Kenya. And then here in the room, to my immediate left, Mr. Volker Ohl. Did I say that right? All right, perfect. Who is the Director General of the Ministry for International Cooperation of Germany. Next, Ms. Galina Andronova-Vincelet, the Vice President of Strategy and Operations Support here at the World Bank. Then Ms. Karen Farbach de Andrade Lima, the Head of Global Foundations and Institutional Donors of the Danish Refugee Council. And finally, Ms. Elena Borginskaya, Vice President of Strategy and Operations Support at the IFC here in DC. So a fantastic panel and a really, really important topic today, which we'll hear more about now from the High Commissioner. And it occurs to me, I didn't actually say who I was. So while we're waiting for the video to queue up, maybe I'll do that. I'm Jeremy Knijndijk, also based here in DC. I'm the president of Refugees International.
Waiting for it to project to the screen.
Just getting it queued up here. There we go.
Thank you to the World Bank for convening this important discussion. President Banga and I share a deep commitment to advancing solutions for refugees and the communities that host them, and the partnership between...
We've got the video. We're working on the volume now. One thing at a time.
President Banga and I share a deep commitment to advancing solutions for refugees and the communities that host them. And the partnership between our institution has never been more important. Over the past decade, our approach to forced displacement has evolved significantly. We increasingly recognize that these are not only humanitarian questions, but also questions of development, governance, economic resilience, and regional stability. The Global Compact on Refugees and successive global refugee forums have helped move this agenda forward, alongside new financing mechanisms developed by multilateral and regional development banks, and the sustained contributions of bilateral partners. Together, they have reinforced an essential principle. Responsibility sharing must extend beyond emergency support alone. Yet the realities on the ground have continued to be deepening. For many countries hosting refugees today, displacement is no longer a short-term challenge at the margins of national policy. It intersects directly with education systems, labor markets, public services, and national development priorities. Since becoming High Commissioner for Refugees, I have seen this firsthand and heard consistently from refugees and host communities that humanitarian action alone cannot meet the challenges of displacement today. Managing displacement indefinitely is not a solution. It is the absence of one. And it is a challenge we must now meet with great intention. That's why UNHCR has set an objective by 2035 to reduce by half the number of refugees living in protracted displacement and dependent on humanitarian assistance. Success cannot be measured only by how effectively we sustain people in displacement, but how we effectively help them move beyond it. This is not intended as a universal formula. Different contexts require different approaches, and governments will undoubtedly and understandably pursue them in ways that reflect their own national priorities and realities. What remains constant is that refugees want to rebuild their lives, support their families, and contribute to the communities that host them. Refugees consistently demonstrate their capacity to contribute economically and socially when barriers to participation are removed. Reaching this objective requires a renewed focus on solutions. For some refugees, voluntary return will remain the preferred outcome when conditions allow it to be safe and sustainable. In many contexts, the answer is greater self-reliance through education, skills, and economic participations, while long-term solutions are pursued. And resettlement and complementary pathways will remain essential, particularly for the most vulnerable, and as part of broader national and international responsibility sharing. Ultimately, peace remains the most decisive driver for solutions. Where conflict ends and stability holds, solutions become possible at scale. Where it does not, displacement becomes more protracted and solutions remain out of reach. Creating pathways to self-reliance and solutions in practice requires investment, an investment that works differently. It means development financing from the World Bank, regional development banks, and bilateral partners. Reaching displacement situations earlier and committing to longer horizons. It means refugees included within host countries' national development, not addressed through parallel structures and measures alongside them. It means the private sector engaged as a genuine partner, bringing investment, jobs, and economic opportunity to displacement-affected economies. And it means humanitarian and development actors working together more deliberately with a shared focus on jobs and inclusion as the practical foundations of solutions. UNHCR is changing how it works to meet this moment we're increasingly shifting from parallel approaches towards greater inclusion in national systems and development planning wherever possible. We're also strengthening partnerships with the development banks, donors, and the private sector to expand opportunities for refugees and host communities alike, including through job creation, economic participation, and greater investment in displacement affected communities. This shift requires us to think differently about our respective roles. Humanitarian action remains indispensable, but it cannot be the end point. Our collective task is to help create the conditions in which refugees can exercise agency, contribute to society, and build their futures with dignity. We have much to build on and much still to figure out together. The real question is not whether we can afford to invest differently, but it is whether we can afford not to. The cost of long displacement are borne not only by refugees, but by host communities, national economies, and future generations. Finally, I want to thank President Banga and the World Bank Board for their strong commitment to this agenda, and I'm confident that together we can move this agenda forward at the scale and ambition this moment demands. Thank you.
Great. As someone who has worked on refugee issues for more than a quarter century, this is a very overdue moment to have a real conversation about not moving away from supporting refugees as kind of through parallel structures, pretending they are separate from national economies. And I think it's very refreshing and very important to hear the High Commissioner talk about the pivot that he is working to lead at UNHCR to move away from parallel service delivery and towards inclusion in national systems. And I was particularly struck by his comment about the economic and social contributions that refugees can make when the barriers to them doing so are removed. And so we want to talk, that's a good setup, I think, for the conversation that we want to have here today. We're going to talk about, in hopefully very practical terms, about what needs to change. What needs to change in terms of the roles and responsibilities that different institutions play and can play. We'll talk about what removing some of those barriers to refugee inclusion would look like. How can refugees become self-reliant and have access to the conditions and the rights that they need in order to become more self-reliant? And implementation, what will it take to put all of this into practice, both in terms of policy, but also some of the governance and political and social dimensions that would need to underpin delivering on this agenda of reducing by 2035 the number of refugees in protracted dependency on aid by 50%. It's an ambitious agenda. It's going to be hard to deliver on, but I think it's also very much the right agenda. And so with that, let me go first to Ambassador Rafael Quintero Cubides, who should be on the screen. I don't know if, Ambassador, are you able to hear us? What's that? Okay, so Ambassador, if you can, they're telling me you should be able to hear us. We can't see you in the room, but hopefully that will be rectified soon. But let me go ahead and ask you the question. So we've just heard from the High Commissioner this very ambitious goal. And Colombia is a country that for years has been already exemplifying the potential of refugee inclusion. Colombia has hosted 2.8 million forcibly displaced Venezuelans. You've been at the forefront amongst hosting countries in adopting inclusive policies, and the results.
Hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, perfect. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you and I can see you. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Okay. We can hear you. We can't yet see you on the screens, but I think that will be fixed, but we can hear you, and that's the important thing. Oh, there we go. Wonderful. So we also see your screen now. If you could turn your camera on. Perfect. Wonderful. Hello, Ambassador. So I was just to finish the question. So Colombia has, for many years, hosted 2.8 million forcibly displaced Venezuelans. You've been at the forefront of adopting inclusive policies that are very much in line and consistent with the High Commissioner's agenda of this 50% by 2035 goal. Could you share with us some of the lessons that Colombia has learned from its policies in welcoming Venezuelans, and how has the Colombian government and the Colombian society managed the welcoming and the inclusion of Venezuelans? What are some of the lessons for other host countries that you would take from the experience in Colombia?
Yes, first of all, let me thank the World Bank and all of you for having us today here in this very important panel. From Colombia's experience as the largest country, hosting approximately 2.8 million Venezuelan refugees and migrants, achieving this goal requires anchoring humanitarian responses in measurable system-level inclusion outcomes. And if you allow me, I would like to highlight three priority shifts. First, the predictable and long-term regularization pathways must anchor all inclusion efforts. Colombia has welcomed in just a few years over 2.8 million Venezuelan refugees and migrants, deeming it in need to be in international protection under the UNHCR in 2019. And during these years, our response has been centered in achieving this goal, moving from assistance-centered responses to sustainable solutions through economic inclusion and to social inclusion. We believe that the most important is to help the migrants to help themselves. Second, ensuring predictable long-term regularization pathways in the foundation of any inclusion strategy. We think that the most important is to visibilize the migrants, is to put the migrants in the agenda of the country. In 2021, Colombia implemented the most ambitious regularization program ever implemented, I think, in the whole world. For your refugee-like population, granting in only 2 years more than 2.3 million Venezuelans a temporary protection status for for Venezuelan migrants. We call in Spanish Estatuto Temporal de Protección para Migrantes Venezolanos. That gives them.
No, I'm not going to bother you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Sorry. I was talking about the Estatuto Temporal de Protección para Migrantes Venezolanos, the Institute for Protection for Venezuelan migrants, with which we have granted more than 2 million targets, cards, identification cards, and that give them the right to stay, move, work, and access the services for 10 years, facilitating access to public services and formal employment. And the results have been clear. Long-term regularization with predictable terms and access to markets and services have yielded jobs and growth for all. A recent World Bank study shows that after 4.5 years, regularized migrants earn 67% higher low labor income than irregular migrants with similar characteristics. They also have greater access to health services, the financial system, social registers, and social protection programs. Through this process, more than 1.6 million Venezuelans has been enrolled in the Colombian health, social, and security system. Evidence also demonstrates that significant improvements in social integration, trust, and cooperation, strengthening social cohesion and generating benefits from both migrant and host communities alike. The story also shows that higher savings and investment in housing, which makes our economy stronger. We believe that migration is richness for all, richness for host countries, richness for countries that will improve their economic situation, and richness for the whole humanity. Displacement is a complex development challenge that makes people's lives forever, often leading to generational poverty traps. Predictable long-term regularization and connected people to labor markets and national systems is key. By enabling access to service and jobs, today Venezuelans are 10 percentage points less multidimensional poor than they were before the ETGP was implemented, the Estatuto Temporal of Protection. Other studies also show that through these years, every peso Colombia has invested in integration to have return in growth in their contribution in taxes paid for the services they receive, yielded positive fiscal return for Colombia. The second is we need to focus on economic integration with systematic private sector engagement. And the third is strengthening social cohesion must be treated as an economic and policy priority, not only a social one. I mean, public perception, trust, and community relations directly shape the sustainability of inclusive policies. Without social acceptance, even well-designed programs face political and operational constraints. This requires sustained investment in local level engagement, communication strategies, and host community inclusion, ensuring that integration policies generate visible and shared benefits for both refugees and host population. In sum, progress towards this target will depend on aligned legal frameworks, labor market integration, and social cohesion into a coherent country-led approach, supported by partners but anchored in national systems and long-term development strategies. While much of achieved challenges persist, Venezuelans are still 3 times poorer than Colombians. About 30% remain irregular, and negative perceptions are still widespread. Colombia remains committed to the integration of migrants and refugees, and we are completely engaged to support our friends and brothers Venezuelans and other nationalities. And we are very concerned about the possibility to get more than 800,000 people exports from countries like USA and Europe with the xenophobic politics put in place right now. So Colombia is engaged with the support of the migrants and refugees, but needs the international cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rafael, and thank you to Colombia for the leadership on this policy agenda that you've just outlined. I want to turn next to Volker. So, Volker, the High Commissioner talked about some of the ways in which engagement with refugees and host communities will need to change, the shifts to incentives, shifts to policies, ways of financing response. We've just heard about the example of Colombia, of how Colombia has approached inclusion as a way of enabling refugees to come off of aid dependency and contribute to society, and the net fiscal benefits and economic benefits when that can be realized. Germany has a really unique vantage point here as both a host country and a donor country. You've had you've famously welcomed in about 1 million Syrians, and had a policy of economic inclusion for many of them. So from that dual perspective, as both host country and donor country, what are some of the lessons that you take away from the German experience and the German role on what needs to change in order to realize this agenda?
Thanks very much, Jeremy. Indeed, we have that dual role of being a hosting country and being an international development partner. Compared to the number of refugees countries like Colombia have taken on board, or when we look at the Middle East, the 1 million, close to 1 million Syrians, I think is a much smaller number. But I think there are some lessons learned. Looking at the High Commissioner's 50 by 35 target, that's really ambitious. But I think it's still within reach, provided that we don't continue to do business as we've done in the past with fewer resources, because that's for sure. Funding for humanitarian assistance will be declining globally, as will be funding for ODA. So in a way, we need a different approach to how we address the challenges and opportunities around hosting refugees. And I think listening to the High Commissioner's statement, I think the solutions or the experiences were all in there. I'd like to maybe make 3 points. The first is really to incentivize hosting governments to include refugees and to reward reforms towards inclusion. The second point will be around incentivizing private partnerships with the private sector, because that's an important facilitator, multiplier. And the third point I'd like to make is that we needed different doing, how we cooperate among each other, others to address the challenges ahead of us. On the first point of incentivizing host governments to integrate refugees, we know that integration decisions are inherently political. And I think Colombia is one of the few examples with a really progressive policy. And what the ambassador said about long-term regularization, we hardly see that in many countries. So I think that is great. That's a great approach. And I think it's underpinned what the ambassador said about the evidence we have. Integrated refugees, migrants are a benefit to the economy of the hosting countries, and I think we need to exploit on that. So I think investing into those integration decisions, looking at the most promising instruments, policy reforms, or whatever you have, which facilitate the integration of refugees is good. I think we do have policies and instruments at hand. We are here at the World Bank. When we look at IDA, we have the fantastic window on host communities and refugees. We have, which is also embedded in a broader window of GROW, and I think these instruments are really meant to incentivize the integration, because we share that view that hosting refugees in a way is a contribution to a global public good of peace and stability, and I think we need to exploit on that. IDA is for the least developed countries. I think we have something similar for the middle-income countries with the GCFF. So there are instruments at hand. I'm sure Galina will speak to that. For our instruments, we also have a special instrument for hosting communities and refugees. We are spending more than half of those funds on creating employment and social security. I think that is really important that we look at to those integration instruments. Second point on incentivizing private sector, I think that was the headline message this morning in the open panel. We need the private sector because it's only the private sector to create jobs, to leverage investments, and that needs, again, I think, an integrated one World Bank group. And as I said before, I think we also look with all our instruments, how can we better bring the private sector on board to take up or use the creative power and workforce of refugees. The last point is on how do we do business. I think it's how do we cooperate among development partners, not business. And I think that starts with UNHCR itself. I think UNHCR has to move towards a more convening role to coordinate all partners around the plans of the hosting country. And I think that UNHCR can do a lot more than in the past. I also think we need to better work on the synergies and complementarities there is still a tendency to focus on our own programs and projects discussed with the government, but that synergies between funding from the bank and what we can maybe contribute as a bilateral partner through capacity building, I think I do see more potential. And I think the last point is we also need to include refugee organizations or diaspora or whatever in terms of really using the creative potential of the refugees and hear their voice. And I think that sometimes is not heard enough.
Thanks so much, Volker. And I appreciate the point you ended on, because I think it's crucial ultimately, if we're talking about refugee inclusion, central to that is ensuring that engages and is responsive to what refugee leaders and refugee communities are saying their aspirations are and their goals are. And I think we have to keep that always at the forefront and the center of any of these discussions. So Galina, we've heard from both from Volker and from Raphael about policy incentives and policy change, and that's something obviously that the bank can have some engagement on. The 50 by 35 goal is going to require substantial changes in the way all of us are collectively engaging in support of refugees and host communities. This is happening and partly driven by this backdrop of the stark cuts in foreign aid that Volker just mentioned that we see around the world. And so what do you see when you look at that landscape? What are some of the ways that the role of the World Bank needs to evolve and to shift in these environments? And how can the World Bank work with other actors to move policy and to incentivize the sort of policy changes that will be needed to implement the High Commissioner's vision?
Great. Thank you very much, Volker. And hello, everyone. Do you hear me? Okay, great. Works somehow magic, I guess. Wonderful. It's really, really good to be here in this extremely important discussion and in this extremely important panel. What we heard from the Commissioner is a really high order objective, 50 by 35, or half of the number of aid-dependent refugees in the world by 2035, which is just less than 10 years away. It's a really high order objective. And there is no way we can reach this objective if we do not work together, if we do not complement each other and do not explore the synergies and look for a multiplier effect to scale the impact of our interventions. And that would require quite a lot of focus and quite a lot of effort, as well as real changes. And perhaps there are three things that can drive this ambition, if you will, to collectively reach the 50 by 35. And the first one is to really place the importance of the host government's leadership in the center of our efforts. We heard from Ambassador Quintero, we heard from the High Commissioner, Volker also touched upon that. the host governments are the ones that really face the challenge of hosting forcefully displaced people and refugees. They face the burden, and we see that most governments have really responded to this challenge with quite a lot of real vision and real desire to work towards integration. And what we have seen, again, the Colombia example is absolutely telling, and probably other governments should follow similar actions to the ones that they have put into place. But the importance here of integrating refugees in national systems is something quite critical, quite key, because parallel systems do not work. Having a parallel system, especially steered from outside, is just counterproductive. So the more we work with national systems, with national structures, expanding economic opportunities, while at the same time taking care of host communities, it's probably one of the key lessons that we have learned from decades of work in this area. And as international partners, I think our role is really to follow their lead, to be there, to be of support, but also to help adapt and adopt the right systems, the right measures, so that we can support the host governments in carrying out these agendas. And where institutions like the World Bank Group can come in is with what we bring to the table, which is knowledge, which is financing, which is advisory. And this is where supporting the efforts through the jobs agenda, which has become our primary focus of helping countries tackle poverty on a livable planet, I think can bring incredibly strong dividends. And when I speak to the jobs agenda, I speak about the three pillars that underpin this agenda. It is about supporting building foundational infrastructure, which goes both ways with respect to physical infrastructure as well as human development infrastructure, whether it's education, whether it's social protection, whether it's health. It is about creating a regulatory environment and governance framework that helps actually foster whether it's entrepreneurship, whether it's innovation, whether it's job creation. But here the role of host governments and the role of governments in general is absolutely indispensable. And it is about bringing and creating private capital that can be mobilized towards this agenda, so that the businesses, and we had a wonderful plenary this morning, so I don't need to convince you about the importance of the private sector in creating jobs, from very small to any type of job that gives dignity, that gives income, that gives prosperity to the communities that are being supported. So that if we think about self-reliance for refugees in the context of jobs, I think we can really support and invest and advance the well-being of refugee hosting nations, but also of the refugees themselves. And lastly, and that's my third point, is that we cannot do this on our own. There is no organization, whether it's the World Bank Group, whether it's a host government, or whether it's an NGO that can tackle the magnitude of this challenge on its own in meaningful way. So this is where the range of partnerships is what makes us stronger, but what makes us gain scale. And here, the vision of the High Commissioner for Refugees is absolutely critical. I mean, he did speak about, and I strongly believe that the range of partners from private sector players all the way to international development organizations is again important. And what we should be looking for here is the complementarity of our efforts and leveraging each other's advantages towards common goals and focus. So with these 3 points, I think we can actually make a meaningful advancement towards the 50 by 35.
Thank you very much. And the point on complementarity is a great segue to Karen. So Karen, Danish Refugee Council is one of the world's leading refugee NGOs, a major partner and a major provider of refugee assistance and protection services in many, many countries around the world. We're talking here as well about moving refugees off of that sort of parallel service provision into national systems. So how do you, as an NGO that does a lot of work in these settings, how do you see that proceeding? And how would an organization like yours need to shift its role and its approach in order to advance this agenda? And how do you see that sort of landing with the wider NGO sector?
Thank you. And thank you for the question. Can you hear me? Good, thank you. So at the Danish Refugee Council, we look at the issue through the lens of the entire displacement cycle. When conflict erupts or natural disasters strike, people flee to safety. They're thinking about survival, food, clean water, and shelter. They're thinking about how to provide for their families. They want to be self-reliant. They're looking around and asking who can help. All of these things are happening at the same time. These phases, the phases they go through are not neatly defined or linear. That is why our approach is solutions from the start. Helping people to become self-reliant as soon as possible is empowering. Because the reality is, people are looking to the future and they want to stand on their own feet. This is where DRC and others are filling the gap, giving people the skills, training, and ability to earn an income. And this is also how we reduce aid dependency and build resilience. It is the same resilience that will carry them through to the next emergency, and hopefully one day when they return home. And this, I think, goes to what's been said throughout the day, that if we want to reduce dependency, then we must strengthen national systems so that they can support displaced people with education, healthcare, and jobs. So also, NGOs have a role here in that we can't continue to build parallel networks of schools or clinics that vanish when funding dries up. Our role must shift towards reinforcing national systems already there. Host communities and local authorities carry the real weight of inclusion, and our job is to share capacity, funnel predictable financing to them, and help make local markets more inclusive. At DRC, we are increasingly designing our programs with system strengthening in mind, even in highly complex settings such as Sudan, Ukraine, or Cameroon. We aim to work through and strengthen local capacities and institutions rather than creating parallel structures that communities depend on indefinitely. And I think, in turn, we also have a role in trying to support and protect national systems by acting early. By turning data into anticipatory action, we can support communities before a crisis peaks, protecting livelihoods and preventing displacement from becoming protracted in the first place. And we have seen that anticipatory action can save lives, time, and money. And we have seen this firsthand in some of the places we work, like South Sudan.
And as someone who in a former life was an NGO country director running exactly some of those kind of parallel systems, it's very refreshing, I think powerful to hear such a prominent organization as DRC talking about moving away from that kind of parallel structure and towards supporting delivery through national systems. Let's go now to Brent Malahay, and hopefully he'll show up on the screen there in a moment. But Brent, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Okay. So, and there you are on the screen. Great. We see you here in the room as well. A number of the other panelists have talked about the importance of the private sector in creating labor opportunities for refugees, but also the potential benefits to the private sector in tapping into refugees as a market and as a source of labor. So when we talk about that, it's really important to look at ways to enable the growth of micro, small, and medium enterprises. And access to finance for both host communities and for refugees themselves is really key to that. So as someone who is very involved in this in Kenya, what will it take for the private sector to engage at scale in this kind of an agenda?
So maybe just let me draw some quick parallels to the discussion here and the broader transformation of Africa. I think the principles that we are trying to come out and to action, one could draw parallels to the broader development of Africa. So one of the key things that we've done at Equity Group is we've reframed how we look at refugees from what are essentially currently viewed or historically viewed as aid beneficiaries to economic participants. And this is essentially what we're talking about today. So that reframing is somewhat taking place. And there was some comments from the other panelists about a journey that someone that is a refugee will need to take to become self-reliant and productive and a participant in economic activities. And we've appreciated this at Equity Bank, that when we look at a continuum of our customers, where we bank refugees all the way to the big multinationals, there is some catalytic development work that is required with these marginalized segments to make them more self-reliant. And our business model is set up in a way that we are able to, in the case for refugees, and this is obviously in partnership with other partners like the UN agencies, UNHCR, once you move beyond saving, stabilizing, there is an element where the journey includes capacitating, connecting, and making sure they participate, commercialize what they do, and consequently become self-reliant. So a lot of the activities we do appreciate that there's this journey, and our business model is set up that way. So reframing the problem statement is quite important, and I think that journey has taken with a number of the development participants. Another key consideration is that we need to align catalytic resources along value chains and ecosystems, and we need to attract factors of production along these value chains. And in this case, factors of production would be of a catalytic developmental nature, whether it's grant funding, technical assistance, in-kind contributions, etc. But important in all of this is the journey that we transition what are aid beneficiaries towards more commercial mechanisms. And this is what we're doing with our partnership with the IFC, with the risk guarantee that we have in place that crowds in our balance sheet, our commercial balance sheet, into these marginalized segments. Maybe a third point, and a lot of these points in terms of reframing, realigning, is somewhat sequential in the approach. A third point would be the mechanisms that will allow to scale up. And here, one would observe that over time that in-kind contributions have transitioned to cash contributions. And maybe there's another iteration where these cash contributions are somewhat transitioned into risk mechanisms, especially if beneficiaries have been repeat beneficiaries. And data, especially because now, at least with what we're doing with our banking refugees, we have data sets that allow us to at least make assessments on these potential customers. So if we can transition some of the current instruments into, say, first loss risk pools that allow us to cover what we would call discovery risk. One of the big challenges we have with these marginalized segments is the lack of data sets. And with the lack of data sets, we rely heavily on instruments like the risk share facility that we have from the IFC, but to really crowd in our balance sheet, first loss would definitely scale up our balance sheet and our activity in these segments. So those are maybe some observations and suggestions.
Thanks so much, Brent. That's really interesting. And it reminds me, your last point there reminds me of something that many years ago I worked on in West Africa, where we did microlending in refugee camps so that refugees could begin building up a credit history that they could then take with them when they went home and use that to access reconstruction capital after they return. So, I mean, there are precedents for exactly that sort of model that you're talking about. Elena, let me go finally to you here. IFC's been at the forefront of efforts to attract the private sector into forced displacement settings. And understanding that refugee hosting areas are often large and underserved markets with real demand for financial services, for housing, for food, for energy, for telecom. So there are opportunities there. There are market opportunities there, but very different and challenging sometimes. And challenging partly because you have this difference between, if it's a middle income country versus a low income country, if the refugees are in an urban area versus a rural area. So where do you and how does IFC understand the greatest potential and what it might take to attract private sector support and engagement towards implementing the 50 by 35 goal?
Thanks very much, and it's a really good discussion. I also realize that we're probably going to run completely out of time.
We're going to have a lightning round for the second round of questions.
But look, first of all, and many of my colleagues have made this point already, and the High Commissioner was very clear. The 50 by 35 vision is not going to happen unless we're able to engage private sector to create jobs for forcibly displaced people. And when I say private sector, I don't only mean micro, small, and medium enterprises, which are at the core of it. I also mean entrepreneurship and refugees being able to, to start their own businesses or forcibly displaced people. I also mean, in some cases, larger companies, both domestic and international. Now, none of them are going to be able to flourish and create anything if some minimum basic conditions are not in place. And, there is a lot of discussion about how the private sector should do this or could do this or will solve everybody's problems. But you have to remember that the forced displacement is not the natural place for the private sector. It is not. And so what, everything that was said before in terms of basic infrastructure, physical, human, institutional infrastructure is absolutely a must, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a larger company, regardless of whether it's low-income country, middle-income country, small market, large market. Regulations and business enabling environment is a must. And here, I think a very important point that I want to make is that we need to look at also, and we were, Jeremy, talking about it before the start of the panel, de jure versus de facto. Because, we have, so you look at the latest data, 67% of refugees have the right to work. In practice, only, 45% of them do. 56% can use either UNHCR ID or the national IDs or the host country's IDs to open a bank account. Only 44% of them in practice are able to do that. And so you can, we can discuss for a very long time how and what needs to happen if a forcibly displaced person does not have the right to work, cannot open a bank account, or cannot have legal right to an agricultural land in the area which is entirely dependent on agriculture, no private sector is going to solve anything. So that's really, really important. And then back to my first point, this is not a natural place. There's also a very important role that various actors, and certainly ourselves, can play in sometimes providing data, research, analytics, to actually demonstrate to the private sector that there is a market opportunity. It's not obvious. It may be obvious to us. It's not obvious to an average private sector player. And similarly, to provide evidence-based arguments to the hosting governments why they should do certain things, because it may make sense economically, but it may make no sense for them politically. And if it does make sense economically, but does not make sense politically, it's not going to happen. And we see and we see that playing out in practice. And to that, I think we should not underestimate the importance of including host communities in whatever resources are being deployed and whatever models are being deployed. Because if inclusion of refugees is seen as at the cost, at the expense of the local host communities, it's not going to work. All you're going to get is more conflict, and that social cohesion is very important. My last point, and again, a number of colleagues mentioned that already, but I think on working together and breaking silos, I think what Brent mentioned about aligning catalytic resources, this is crucial. And I think there's a lot of fragmentation across various actors. Yes, the resources are going down and they will continue to go down. The question is, I think for all of us, is how are we able to leverage the fewer dollars or whatever currency we have? How can we leverage each dollar more? And that's where, yes, various de-risking instruments, whether it's guarantees, whether it's pooling resources for some sort of a first loss provision, some other tools, but not trying to do a little thing here and a little thing there, but really bringing different actors together to get much more leverage for whatever resources we can bring together, I think is going to be absolutely crucial.
Thanks so much, Elena. And Omer, I might suggest we skip the second round of questions and go straight to the audience. He's nodding, so okay. So let's go to the audience. We'll take a few questions, and then we'll do this for about 20 minutes, and then come back to our panelists to share some closing reflections after the Q&A. So, okay, sir.
And internal displacement. So I would like to thank all the speakers to highlight, these important issues. IGAD hosts the most important refugees in the world. When you see the rate of the population of IGAD, we have 6 million refugees. We have 20 million internal displacement because of the wars, conflicts, and natural disaster, because there is a lot of the natural disaster who hit in this area of the world. So IGAD also has the third support platform, refugees, after one Afghanistan and Central America and Mexico. So this platform also is to work in the economic inclusions, because we have a number of progress to integrate, the refugees in our population in entire. We have at the regional level, we are developing a policy to integrate, and there is a Djibouti Declaration, Nairobi Declaration, Kampala Declaration. All this decision is making to integrate to access for education, access for health, access for also many others service and documentation, because some of them the country accept to give citizenship. So there is a lot of burden. And IGAD is trying to mobilize, the partners. Thanks to German government, BMZ, they are working on the borderlands. They are working, building, market, community centers, energy, waters. This part is not enough because there is a lot of things. And due to these conflicts and wars, there is competing priorities for the member state of IGAD to not allow them to assist, this population. So now it's occasion for me as Director of Health and Social Development to make a call for this population, very big population, refugees and internal displacement. So if there is any support from the World Bank for the other partners, we need to assist IGAD. It's the time because this also population, they are going, there is a East Road, Red Sea Road crisis is a very deadly road. They are going from Ethiopia to Djibouti, and they are going to Yemen, to the Gulf states.
Yeah.
There is a lot of challenge, and people, they lost a lot of lives, thousands and thousands in every year. We make a conference in Djibouti for this. We call to the partners. We also make a field missions. And when you see these people, in the desperate situation that they have, well, I can continue to all, but
thank you, Ambassador. No, it's such an important point. I really appreciate you sharing some of the experience and that call to action to support IGAD with what's a very severe situation developing in the Horn of Africa. Thank you.
Jeremy, is it okay if we take?
Yes, let's take a few and then we'll just maybe do one round of answers. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Ana Aguilera. I'm with the World Bank. I work in Central America. As a question to Galina, several of you have mentioned the need to work together and the need to kind of align incentives, right, to make it work and provide risk guarantee. Is the World Bank willing to expand concessionality to public and private sector, especially in countries, in FCV countries hosting now returnees who were previously refugees in other countries, or who were TPS holders and now lost status and have come back? Because we've been 12 years in this agenda and we have not seen an appetite to expand concessionality in countries like Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hi, I'm Lindsay Jenkins with Georgetown University and Vantage Collaborative. One of the key partners that I didn't get to hear any mention of as yet are subnational actors, with the vast majority of the world's refugees living in urban settings. It seems like the Refugee Self-Reliance agenda is going to be really critical at that level. So I'd love to hear any reflections you all have on the role of subnational actors in self-reliance, as well as any reflections on unlocking financing for subnational actors to help carry out this important work at that level. Thank you.
Why don't we take one more and then I'll go to the panelists and oh, okay, and we have one online. Okay.
Thank you. I'll take the chance because it's very related. My name is Mariana Martin. I'm with the Pan American Development Foundation. For the past year and a half, we've been very focused on working with local governments, mayor's office and government level, governorship level governments. And one thing that we've seen over and over again is a lot of willingness because they are the most affected by this, but not a lot of available resources. So my question was more for the Elena for IMF. I know the IFC, sorry, I know they have been pushing to get certain funding, but a lot of like loans and mechanisms are available only for national governments. I don't know if you can expand on any experiences or any information on resources for local governments.
And should we take one from online as well? Because I have a sense, looking at the time, we might not get to another round. So what?
So I'll just tell it.
Okay, I'll repeat it.
I believe we need to go beyond consulting refugees or persons. So the person, Gabriel, here online is asking, I believe we need to go beyond consulting refugees or persons affected by forced displacement, but to co-create solutions for their inclusion and self-reliance with them. And they are curious on what are the panelists' thoughts on this and how it can happen.
Great. So I am going to I'll just turn to the panelists in order. A few of you had specific questions pointed to you, but feel free to just respond to whatever, whatever strikes you from some of these very interesting, very important questions. Maybe first, if we go back to Ambassador Rafael on the screen. Maybe we'll just do the two people on the screen first and then come back to the room.
I heard you very good.
So, Ambassador, we heard there some really interesting observations about questions about concessionality, about local government support, subnational actors. What in the Colombia experience, what does Colombia's experience have to inform or to say about some of these questions?
Thank you. Yes, I would like to say that from Colombian experience, we have learned that the building political support for refugee and migrants inclusion policies requires far more than good intentions. It requires generating rigorous technical evidence, strengthening institutions, and mobilizing multiple actors around a shared vision. If you allow me, I have 3 points to highlight, but maybe I just want to highlight one. The first one is that the inclusion must be embedded with a long-term state policy with a development lens, not in temporary response tied to a specific administration. Colombia's most strategic decision was to institutionalize its response through long-term public policies. We did so through COMPES documents, 3590 from 2018 and 4100 from 2022, as well as one that currently are under development under my revision. I mean, COMPES is a political and economical policy document with a view of compulsory 10 years term for all the institutions of the authorities of Colombia. So the countries, these documents are approved by the country's highest planning body. These multi-sectorial instruments establish national priorities, assign responsibility across institutions, and define goals and monitoring indicators. This allows the response to transcend political cycles and ensure continuity across administrations, institutions, and safeguards against political volatility. Also, grounding these policies as in evidence has been essential. We have demonstrated that regularization and inclusion policies generate sustained increase in income, access to services, and even fiscal contributions over time, thereby strengthening political support. It has allowed us to present inclusion not only as humanitarian imperative, but also as policy that delivers concrete economic and social benefits for the country. In conclusion, I mean that the solutions for refugees, returns, and hosting communities is a general and holistic action from the administration of the country and also for the society. This is what Colombia has been doing during these 10 years, and this is what the community, the international community, must copy and put in practice for all the migrant crisis that I presented, and for sure will be presented in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Brent, can I go to you next? And want to prompt you with the question about subnational actors. So you talked in your earlier remarks about the need to think along the value chain and make investments in a way that is strategic and moving the assets to the places where they will be catalytic, which is not just at a national level, but really down to a subnational level and kind of following the economic patterns of the country. So could you reflect a little bit on that? And in a private sector financing sense, how do you look at the dynamics beyond the country level down to the subnational level?
So we think from a systems perspective, and the components of that system, which comprises everyone from the household all the way to export markets, where we work very closely with governments as off-takers or suppliers of factors of production. And this would include cooperatives at the regional level, county level, and the county governments, etc. So one of the key activities we have in bringing these different stakeholders together is we are quite proactive in setting up multi-stakeholder engagements, roundtables, where we have everyone in the room. We sit on a number of steering committees. So we see ourselves not as a commercial bank, but a transformation finance institution. And more important than blended finance, we believe coordinated finance. There was an earlier comment that the amount of resources is not the issue. It's how we optimize and coordinate the resources. So for us, it's not so much how we interact with the different stakeholders. It's how we coordinate with all of them and align with all of them. And that means engaging in forums like this. But so that's maybe just some comments I would have on that question.
Thanks for that, Brent. Volker, interested in how you react to any of those questions, but in particular, we have this call from IGAD for a lot of support. How do you view the role of regional entities like IGAD, and how can Germany support this at a regional level and kind of move forward on some of the agendas that the ambassador referenced, especially in such a challenging time?
Thank you very much to all of you for those very good points and practical points. Having listened to the ambassador from IGAD, that's why and the numbers of forced displaced people in the region, that's why I said Germany, compared to that, is a very small hosting country. But I can assure you, we as Germany have IGAD on our mind, and you refer to that. So, but I think regional organizations have a crucial role to play, because a number of those protected crises are regional crises, and we can't solve that addressing only individual countries. So I think the regional organizations really have a role to play with that. And for example, with IGAD, we have a structured discourse and annual or biannual meetings, and agree on a joint agenda going forward. Second point on the local level, subnational level, I think that is key. That's where the refugees are being hosted. That's where we need to find solutions, and that's where, and Elena referred to that, social tension can arise. And I think the approach we all follow always address refugees and hosting communities. You can't do one without another. And I think it's a local level where we build the resilience and where we build systems. And so it was not mentioned, but I think it's very key to everything we do. But at the same time, we can't do without working with the national governments. I think that's important. What we've done maybe in the past to work too late, and only once the crisis is protracted, and we know that a number of refugees will stay in the country, we work on that integration. So taking up that dialogue very early, providing capacity building to governments in creating and designing inclusion policies. I think that is the lessons learned we are increasingly taking up. We work with countries like Mauritania and that will feature tomorrow in the forum on the policy designs. We are lucky that countries like Colombia have been pushing on their own, but even in Colombia, we as Germany and we some partners from the European community have been helping implementing that policy. I think that's also important. And last point I liked was about the question on concessionality. I'm looking forward to that answer from Galina. But we in our system, for example, working with Turkey on the huge number of Syrian refugees they've been hosting, we've provided concessional funding, loans and loan subsidies to Turkish companies employing Syrian refugees, but also people from the local communities. So I think there is some need for de-risking private investments, and I think there are a number of practical examples for that.
Thanks so much, Volker. And let me go next to Galina. So we've talked today about the ways that different institutions need to change. We've got a very concrete question about concessional financing and whether that now needs to be expanded in order to realize this agenda.
Very good. That's the easy question, right? So I'll try to tell you a little bit how we are thinking about that, and actually some of the concrete steps that we have taken forward. And I hope to learn more about the LUC project and the LUC idea. I don't see the colleague out there, and see if we can fit any of those projects into the programs that we have ongoing. And those programs are primarily IDA. IDA is our most concessional fund for the poor, with IDA having a dedicated FCV envelope window, which is highly concessional. So countries have greatly benefited from that, and will continue to support these countries through these resources. But on top of it, we do have also GROW, and Volker mentioned that, and GROW for IDA countries and its equivalent, the framework for financial incentives for the middle income country set of countries, is that scheme, if you will, that program that allows you to tackle global challenges with cross-border externalities. Among these challenges is FCV. So actually we are supporting projects in countries and giving an incentive, and I'll speak about what type of incentive this is in a minute, if there is a cross-border externality that we can help reduce the viability gap and support these projects to go ahead and to be implemented. And the type of incentives that are embedded in FFI, in the framework of financial incentives, are three. It is volume, and this is where we have an extra pot of resources, which donor governments like Germany, but also others, have provided to the balance sheet of IBRD so that we can use leverage and expand the pot. It is tenor, so we can have longer term maturities so that, again, countries can benefit from that. And it is also price incentive. The price incentive is very much dependent on what is in the Livable Planet fund, which is again a trust fund which subsidizes, if you will, the price of a financing which the World Bank extends on this type of global challenges with cross-border externalities, of which FCV is. So we look very carefully in each and every project that applies for this type of incentives, because the pot of resources is not large. The pot is very small. But where we can give an incentive for this type of projects to go ahead, we do. and we already have a really good track record. It's been only 1 year under implementation, but you do see projects across the global, all the global challenges, including FCB, that are already benefiting from this type of incentive. So even if the resources are not growing, but to the contrary, foreign aid and ODA is going down, we are finding way to bring in the incentive so that we can enable then stretch this extra dollar that we get.
Thank you, Galina. Karen, we had a question about co-creation and including refugees, not just talking about refugees. And I am cognizant that on the panel today, we're not doing a great job of modeling that principle. So just to acknowledge that. But how does DRC think about that in implementing this agenda going forward?
So first of all, thank you for that question, and we completely agree. I would argue that self-reliance cannot be designed for people. It has to be built with them. Refugees and displacement affected communities understand the barriers they face, the opportunities that exist locally, and the kinds of support that are most likely to work in their context. We've heard that said before, that every context is different. And if we only consult with them after decisions have already been made, we miss that knowledge. So at DRC, we're increasingly trying to involve communities not only in identifying needs, but also in shaping solutions and setting priorities, and informing program design. And we see this particularly in our work on anticipatory action and community-led peace building, where local communities are often the first to identify risks and the most important actors in preventing them from escalating. And then I'd also just like to add that co-creation should extend beyond refugees themselves, of course. Host communities, local authorities, and local organizations all need to be part of the conversation. Inclusion is ultimately a shared challenge, and sustainable solutions are usually those that are owned locally rather than imported from the outside. So yes, I think the shift from consultation to genuine participation and co-creation is an important part of building both self-reliance and inclusion.
Wonderful, perfectly put. Elena, we've covered most of the questions already, so I'm just going to kind of give you a toss-up to react to whatever you want to, and maybe given that we're basically at time, maybe to give us a reflection or two to close us out.
So sounds good. Just 2 points. One on the importance of subnational governments. I think that's a very good question and a very good point. Now there, I completely agree with what Volker said, that you can't still dissociate with the national governments, because on financing, for example, depending on the degree of fiscal decentralization in the country, it may or may not be possible to extend a loan to the local government. But that said, the 3 areas where we absolutely need to work together. One is evidence-based advocacy. The other is the second one is capacity building and advisory support, and the third one is financing. And I want to say that, and Brent talked a little bit about it, but actually, if I think about the example of Kakuma in Kenya, and the success that we've had, and what did it take? It took the national government, it absolutely took the subnational government's leadership. And without that, nothing would have happened. Involvement of UNHCR, involvement of private sector players like Equity Bank, and then IFC as part of the World Bank Group. And I think that's an example to me of how bringing various actors together can really work. And then on the point of co-creation, just to reinforce, of course, co-creating with refugees is critical, and local communities and all the actors that have been mentioned, bringing in the voice of the private sector, if we want the private sector to be the answer, is critical. And I still attend too many events and too many discussions when it's a big, important, high-level roundtable, talking about, again, what the private sector should do, and there's not a single voice from the private sector talking about what actually are the conditions that would make them move into that space. And until and unless we make that shift, I think it's going to be very difficult for us to implement any sort of solutions at scale. And I think that's a critical shift that we as an international community of different partners need to make in order to be able to move in the direction of 50 by 35.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. So a tremendous discussion today. I saw a lot more hands around the room, which I think just means that we need to have more of these sessions going forward and keep the discussion, keep the dialogue going. But a really good first step today, hearing from the High Commissioner, laying out this ambitious agenda and talking through some of the practical steps, whether that's governance, political, social inclusion, financial investment, transition away from parallel to government service provision. A lot of steps, a lot of work to do, but a great first step. And thank you. Please join me in thanking the panelists for their wonderful comments. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Oh, nice. And I have to run to my other one.